Every street in Lagos has at least one person that the devil himself looks at and says, "Ha! This one that my student." On Ajayi Crescent in Surulere, that person was Benson Okole, also known as Agent Benson, also known as Oga of Inspection Fee, also known as the man who once showed a pregnant woman a house whose ceiling had a hole so big you could watch the stars from the bedroom without even trying. Benson was 38 years old, but he looked 52 because Lagos had been working him like a government contractor. He had a mustache that sat on his upper lip like it had paid rent and refused to leave. His yellow shirt was always 2 shades brighter than any shirt in the room because Benson believed that if your clothes were loud enough, people would be too distracted to notice they were being cheated. He operated from a plastic chair under a mango tree at the junction of Ajayi and Coca Street, where he had nailed a small sign to the tree trunk that read, "Benson Okole and Associates, Property Agent. We show you your dream home. Inspection fee, 5,000 naira, non-refundable." Nobody had ever seen the associates. Some people believed they didn't exist. Benson's cousin Okeke, who sold pure water 3 streets away, once asked who the associates were, and Benson said, "God Amaichi, now mind your business." His method was simple, beautiful in its simplicity. A person would walk up looking for a house. Benson would pull out a fat notebook that contained nothing useful, just phone numbers, old football scores, and once someone found a recipe for egusi soup, and he would flip through it slowly, making serious faces like a doctor studying a test result. Then he would look up and say, "I have something, but first, small inspection fee, make I confirm the house still available." The fee was technically to confirm availability. In practice, it was to confirm that Benson could afford suya and a cold martina that evening. He had been doing this for 6 years without a single successful transaction that didn't end in someone threatening to report him to Lassa, the police, their pastor, or all 3 simultaneously. He didn't care. Lagos was big. There were always new people arriving every Monday from Owerri, Kano, Ibadan, Akure. Fresh faces, fresh hope, fresh wallets. Benson Okole was always ready to welcome them. It started, as most Lagos disasters do, on a Tuesday. A young woman named Priscilla Adeyemi walked up to Benson's mango tree at 9 a.m. looking neat and purposeful in a blue gown, a small handbag on her wrist, and the kind of optimism on her face that Lagos usually destroys within 6 months of arrival. "Good morning, sir. Are you the property agent?" Benson sat up straight. His yellow shirt gleamed. "My sister, you are at the right place. Benson Okole and Associates, at your service. Please sit down." He gestured to a second plastic chair that had a crack running down its middle. Priscilla sat carefully. "I'm looking for a 2-bedroom flat. Something quiet. I work from home. I'm a graphics designer, so I need a very serene environment. Peaceful. No noise." Benson's eyes lit up like a generator that just got fuel. Serene. Peaceful. He wrote something in his useless notebook. Then he looked up with deep professional seriousness. "My sister, I have exactly what you are looking for. 2-bedroom flat, very quiet, nobody they shout there at all. In fact," he leaned forward conspiratorially, "even the neighbors are silent, very, very silent." "Oh, wonderful. Where is it?" "First, small inspection fee, 5,000 naira. Make I call the caretaker, confirm the house still available." Priscilla paid. She had done research. She knew about inspection fees. She thought this was normal. She was not yet to know what kind of normal Benson Okole operated. Benson called someone on his phone, had a full conversation in which he said things like, "Yes, the property, 2-bedroom, it's still available. Good," and then hung up. Nobody had picked up on the other end. He had been talking to a dial tone for 45 seconds. He'd practiced this. They took an Okada to a street in Ijesha-Tedo. As they turned the corner, Priscilla noticed something. The street was quiet, profoundly, disturbingly quiet. There were no children playing, no generator noise, no woman shouting at her husband. She thought, maybe this is serene. Then she saw the gate. The gate was iron, black and old, and above it, written in faded white letters, were the words Ijesha-Tedo Municipal Cemetery, established 1967. She stopped walking. "Agent Benson." "Yes, my sister. Why are we at a cemetery?" Benson did not miss a beat. "The house is not in the cemetery. It's beside the cemetery. Small difference. Very prime location." Prime location. "Yes, you said serene. My sister, have you ever heard any noise coming from a cemetery? Zero disturbance. The neighbors are dead.
Benson, she screamed. They are very, very quiet neighbors. That is what you asked for. Priscilla's hit him with her handbag on the left ear with enough force to relocate his earring. The slap of leather on skin made a sound that disturbed 3 birds from a nearby tree. She demanded her money back. Benson explained, at length, that the fee was non-refundable. Priscilla called him 14 different names, turned around, and left. An old man sitting outside the house beside the cemetery had watched the whole thing and was laughing so hard he spilled his tea. Benson fixed his shirt, smoothed his mustache, and walked back to his mango tree. Priscilla was not the first, and she was not the worst. There was Mr. Haruna from Kano, who came to Lagos looking for a shop. He paid the inspection fee, 10,000 naira this time. Benson had increased the price for commercial properties and was taken to a shop in Oshodi that turned out to be a converted container with a hole cut in the front for a door, and inside it smelled like something had died, gotten buried, been dug up, and then died again. Mr. Haruna, a man of few words, simply looked at Benson for a long time. Then he walked back to the Okada, rode away, and was never seen in Surulere again. There was Mama Chisom, a market woman who wanted a 2-bedroom flat she could share with her daughter and her daughter's twins. Benson showed her a flat in Aguda. The flat itself was fine, reasonable size, decent walls, except that the landlord had divided it into 4 units by nailing plywood boards floor to ceiling, and each unit was roughly the size of a generous wardrobe. When Mama Chisom opened the bedroom door and her shoulder touched both walls simultaneously, she turned around with a look on her face that made Benson's shirt shrink 3 sizes. "Benson," she said quietly, which was somehow worse than shouting, "do you want me to keep my twins in my armpit? It's very cozy." "My armpit, Benson." She did not hit him. She did something worse. She sat on his plastic chair and refused to leave until he gave back half her money, which took 3 hours and the intervention of a passing pastor who told Benson that God was watching. Benson gave back 2,000 naira, which was not half of anything, but Mama Chisom was tired and had twins to feed. Then there was the episode people in the neighborhood still called the flooding incident. A young couple, newlyweds from Edo State, came looking for their first home together. They were so in love it was almost painful to watch. The husband kept holding his wife's hand, and she kept smiling at him, and it was the kind of happiness Lagos was specifically designed to dismantle. Benson showed them a garden flat in Isolo, ground floor, which he described as having easy access to nature. He neglected to mention that the flat was located in an area that flooded every single time it rained, and that the previous tenant had left behind a rubber dinghy, which was still in the backyard for what the neighbors described as practical reasons. The couple visited on a dry day and it looked fine. They paid their inspection fee. They went home excited. They called Benson the next week after heavy rain. The wife called, weeping, "Benson, the flat is flooded. There is water up to my knee inside the living room." "Ah, that one is normal for this season. By November, it dry. It is June, Benson." "Yes, so by November." She hung up. Her husband drove to Benson's mango tree. Benson saw the car coming slowly down Ajayi Crescent, and something in the way the headlights moved made him get up from his plastic chair and walk inside the nearest shop, where he hid among bags of rice for 45 minutes until the car left. But the crown jewel, the masterpiece, was what Benson had done to engineer Chukwuemeka Obiechina. This man had come from Enugu with solid money and serious intentions. He wanted a 3-bedroom bungalow. He had brought his wife and his mother. His mother was a small woman who walked with a stick and had the eyes of someone who had seen many things and forgiven none of them. Benson collected 20,000 naira inspection fee. He took them to a bungalow in Ejigbo. The house looked decent from outside. They went in. The sitting room was okay. The kitchen was okay. Then they went to the first bedroom. Fine. Second bedroom. Fine. Third bedroom. The third bedroom had no roof, not a damaged roof, not a leaking roof, no roof. The sky was right there. A bird had built a nest in the corner where the ceiling should have been. As they stood there, all 4 of them staring up at the clouds, the engineer's mother slowly turned to look at Benson. She didn't say anything. She just looked at him. Her stick, her eyes, the nest in the corner, The clouds. Benson started explaining something about renovation in progress and can be completed within, and the engineer's mother lifted her stick and hit Benson across the shin so hard he hopped on one leg for 30 seconds. Then she walked out. The engineer and his wife followed. Nobody refunded anything because by the time the engineer's mother finished walking out, Benson had remembered an urgent appointment and was already 3 streets away, limping. Now, this is where the story changes temperature. On a bright Wednesday morning in October, a black Toyota Camry, not new but clean, the way things are clean when someone cares deeply about them, parked near Benson's mango tree. From it stepped a woman who was roughly 50 years old, wearing a plain Ankara blouse and wrapper, flat slippers, and the kind of calm face that experienced Lagos people recognized immediately as dangerous. Not aggressive, not loud, calm. Her name was Mrs. Veronica Ronke Adebisi, and she had just retired from 22 years as head of consumer protection at the Lagos State Ministry of Commerce. She had spent 2 decades protecting Lagos residents from fraudsters, substandard goods, and dishonest traders. She knew every trick. She had written a handbook. The handbook was on the ministry's website and had been downloaded 4,000 times. She was looking for a flat in Surulere because her daughter lived nearby and she was tired of Lekki traffic. She had done some research. She knew the market rates. She knew her rights. And she had specifically been warned about a certain agent on Ajayi Crescent who operated under a mango tree and was, according to several testimonies on a neighborhood WhatsApp group, a complete and total Yahoo man in Agbada. She walked to Benson's mango tree the way a lion walks toward a goat who is busy taking a selfie. "Good morning. Are you Agent Benson?" Benson stood, yellow shirt, mustache, notebook, full performance mode. "My sister, you are most welcome. Senior Benson Okole at your complete service. How may I serve you today?"
I need a 2-bedroom flat, Surulere access, modern amenities, reasonable service charge. I don't want to be inside a canal, beside a cemetery, or under an open sky. Can you help me? Benson blinked. The cemetery comment landed a little, but he recovered quickly. "Madam, you have come to the right person. I have exactly. How much is your inspection fee?" 5,000 naira. Non-refund. Give me a receipt. Silence. Benson had not been asked for a receipt in 6 years of operation. He actually didn't own a receipt book. His brain scrambled. Receipt? My receipt book is at my office currently. Write it on a paper. Date, your name, my name, amount, purpose, sign it. Benson stared at her. She stared back. He wrote it. She folded it neatly and put it in her handbag. Then she paid 5,000 naira and waited. Inside Benson's chest, something small and animal was turning over, trying to figure out what was wrong. But 5,000 naira was 5,000 naira, and he had suya to buy. Benson took Mrs. Adebisi to a flat in Body Thomas. He actually tried this time. He'd selected a place that was at least structurally complete, meaning it had all 4 walls and a roof. He walked her through with confidence, pointing at things professionally. 3-year-old building, good ventilation. The landlord is a very nice man. Mrs. Adebisi was not listening to Benson. She was walking around, opening things. She opened the kitchen tap. A thin, ashamed trickle of water came out, coughed once and stopped. Water supply, borehole water, fully functional. The tap just coughed at me, Agent Benson. It is the time of day. She walked to the bathroom. She opened the shower. Same problem. A sound like a man clearing his throat, then nothing. She turned the shower head and looked into it. Something that might have once been a spider had clearly made permanent home in there. She turned around. When was this flat last occupied? Recently, Benson. There's a spider inside this shower that has paid more months of rent than any human. This place has not been occupied in at least 2 years. Benson opened his mouth. Mrs. Adebisi raised one finger, not threatening, just one finger, held up. Benson's mouth closed on its own. "I will not take this house, but I will not abuse you either. I am not finished with you. Take me to the next one." This was unexpected. Every other person who rejected a house had either insulted him or left. Nobody had ever said "take me to the next one," as though this were a scheduled program. Benson was confused in a new and interesting way. "Madam, the inspection fee covers 1 house only. Your sign under the tree doesn't say that. It is implied. Is it written?" Benson thought about his invisible sign. No. Then it is not a term. Next house. The second flat was in Aguda, and Benson thought this one was actually decent. He had shown it to 2 other people before without incident. They'd simply not been able to afford the rent. He walked her through the gate with a little more confidence. The flat was on the 1st floor. They climbed the stairs. Benson knocked on the door.
The caretaker, a young boy who looked like he was 16 and had been left in charge of too much, unlocked it and stepped aside. Benson pushed the door open. It swung in, then came off the top hinge. Mrs. Adebisi looked at the door. The door, insofar as a door can look at anything, seemed to look back at her apologetically. The caretaker boy immediately started saying, "It's just the hinge, we will fix." Benson was already explaining, "Minor issue, very minor." Mrs. Adebisi walked past the leaning door and into the flat. She was making notes on her phone. Benson watched her with the first genuine nervousness he'd felt in years. She went to the kitchen. She opened a cupboard. Inside, the shelf had collapsed under the weight of nothing because there was nothing on it, and yet it had still somehow surrendered.
She opened the bedroom. The window had no louvers. They had been removed. Whether by theft or by the flat's general philosophy of self-destruction was unclear. But the result was a large rectangular hole where the window should have been, and through it, the neighboring building's wall was close enough to touch. Mosquitoes would have immediate all-hours access. She turned to Benson. "Agent Benson, a door that is falling, a cupboard shelf that has quit, and a window that has been converted into an open invitation to malaria. Does this seem like a good house to you? Everything can be fixed. Will the landlord fix them before a tenant moves in?" Benson looked at the caretaker boy. The caretaker boy looked at the ceiling with the expression of someone who had suddenly remembered an important errand in another state. "We can negotiate." Next house. By the third house, something unprecedented was happening to Benson Okule. He was starting to feel something that, in 6 years of professional property deception, had been entirely absent from his operations. It wasn't quite shame. It wasn't quite fear. It was something between the two, a low buzzing feeling behind his ears that he associated with occasions when things were not going according to the plan inside his head. The third flat was in Ojuelegba, and Benson had some personal history with this one. He'd sent Haruna there 2 years ago, and he'd sent the young couple there, and neither had complained about the structure because the structure was actually fine. 3 bedrooms, solid walls, functional taps, even a small balcony. But Benson had failed to account for the neighbor. The neighbor in the adjacent flat was a man named Pastor Bright Oluwole, who had recently started a church from his sitting room. Not just any church, a full operation with microphones, amplifiers, a keyboard player with more enthusiasm than skill, and a congregation of about 40 people who gathered on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and twice on Sundays. When Benson walked Mrs. Adebisi into the building and they were halfway up the stairs, the keyboard started. Then the pastor's voice hit the microphone. "Hallelujah! Somebody shout fire, fire, fire," and the building vibrated gently. Mrs. Adebisi stopped on the staircase and turned slowly to look at Benson. Benson cleared his throat. "Religious activities. Very safe neighborhood. Is it Tuesday?" "Yes, and this is happening on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. He has a, from behind the wall, "Receive your miracle. Receive it. The enemy is a liar." The amplifier crackled. The keyboard reached for a high note and missed. Mrs. Adebisi descended the stairs calmly and walked back to the street. Benson followed. When they got outside, she turned to him with an expression that was almost scientific, like a doctor examining a fascinating specimen. "Benson, ma, have you, in your entire career, ever successfully found someone a house?" The question hung in the air. Benson's mustache twitched. "I have facilitated many. Successful tenancies. People who moved in and stayed happily." Silence. "I can find you one more," Benson said quietly, and there was something in his voice that was different. Not reformed, not suddenly honest, but something adjacent to embarrassment trying to find a parking space. "I know a place, proper one. Let me show you." Mrs. Adebisi looked at him for a long moment. "Lead the way." What Benson didn't know, what he absolutely had no idea about, was that Mrs. Adebisi had not come alone. Following at a careful distance, in a beige Uber that kept slowing and stopping whenever they stopped, was Mrs. Adebisi's daughter, Titi, who was 26, worked in digital media, and had spent the morning filming everything on her phone through the car window. Also in the Uber, Titi's friend, Deola, who was a lawyer, and Deola's boyfriend, Kunle, who had come along because Deola had described the plan in a way that made it sound like a movie, and he'd brought popcorn, which he was eating in the back seat. When the Uber driver asked what they were doing, Deola said, "Justice, but fun justice." Mrs. Adebisi knew what she was doing. She had spent 22 years building cases. She understood that the crime was not just the individual fraud, it was the pattern.
She had collected through a WhatsApp group 5 signed statements from previous victims of Benson Okoli. Priscilla, the cemetery woman, had given a 3-paragraph testimony with emojis. Mama Chisom had contributed a voice note of 12 minutes that included crying at the end but was very clear on facts. Even the engineer's mother had called in from Enugu to dictate her statement to her grandson, who typed it up and sent it. All of this was armed and ready. What Mrs. Adebisi was waiting for was the 4th house, because after the 4th house, she would have documented evidence of a pattern of deceptive conduct. 4 properties shown under false pretenses after a non-refundable fee. Pattern, intent, system. That was a case. The 4th house Benson showed her was genuinely, unexpectedly decent. This surprised everyone, including Benson himself, who seemed almost startled to find himself at a functional property. It was a 2nd-floor flat on Afolabi Street. Clean compound, working water supply, louvers intact, roof present, no cemeteries within visible range. The caretaker was a sensible-looking woman who clearly took her job seriously. The building was maybe 8 years old and had been maintained. When Mrs. Adebisi opened the taps, water came out with confidence. She walked through the flat slowly. Benson walked behind her, almost nervous, which was a new experience for his nervous system. She checked the bedroom, she tested the windows, she looked at the kitchen tiles. They were clean. She opened the wardrobe in the master bedroom and nobody had hidden anything terrible inside it. She turned to Benson and said, "This is a fine flat." Benson exhaled in a way that he hadn't exhaled in hours. "Yes, madam, I told you." "What is the rent?" 150,000 per annum plus. Plus what? 2 years upfront and agency fee, 10% and caution fee and agreement. That is standard. And your own commission, 10% of annual rent. So, 75,000. Yes, standard in the industry. Of course. But first, let me ask you something. Mrs. Adebisi sat down on the small bench in the living room and crossed her legs. She opened her handbag and removed a folder. Not a big folder. Small, neat. The kind of folder that means someone has been thinking about you before you knew they were thinking about you. Benson looked at the folder. Something cold moved through his chest. "Benson, how many people have you collected inspection fees from in the past 3 years?" Silence. "I have 5 statements here. Priscilla Adeyemi, cemetery. Mama Chisom, the wardrobe flat. Engineer Obiechina, no roof. The couple from Edo, flood property. And Mr. Haruna, the container." She opened the folder and laid the papers on her knee with the calm of someone laying down a winning hand in a card game they have already won. Benson's mustache stopped moving. He had never seen his victims assembled in document form before. Seeing them like that, 5 people, 5 experiences, 5 inspection fees, made something shift behind his eyes. "Madam, those situations, I am not finished." She nodded toward the window. Benson turned. Down in the compound below, Titi had gotten out of the Uber and was standing there with her phone raised, filming. Diola stood beside her with a folder of her own. Benson turned back. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "Who are?" "My daughter, a lawyer." Mrs. Adebisi did not look toward the window again. "Benson, my name is Mrs. Veronica Adebisi. I retired from the Lagos State Consumer Protection Unit. I have handled over 300 fraud cases in my career. I have personally prosecuted 11 property agents for deceptive practices. The maximum penalty under CAMA for fraudulent agency operations is, madam, please, is 5 years imprisonment and a fine. Additionally, the 5 individuals whose statements I hold are all willing to testify. That makes this a pattern case, not an isolated incident, which increases the prosecution's weight significantly." She reached back into her bag and placed one more document on her knee. Benson squinted at it. It was a printed WhatsApp conversation. He saw his own phone number. He saw messages. His messages sent from his phone to various people setting up inspections for fees. Digital evidence. His knees had a small but noticeable disagreement with the rest of his body about whether to hold him upright. "Sit down, Benson," she said pleasantly. "We need to talk." What happened next on Afolabi Street was the most extraordinary thing to occur in that building. Benson Okole, who had, in 6 years of operation, never apologized for anything, never refunded anything, never felt anything, sat down on the other end of the bench and listened. Mrs. Adebisi spoke for 20 minutes. She did not shout. She did not threaten dramatically. She laid out clearly and with devastating specificity exactly what had happened, what evidence existed, what could be reported, and what the consequences would be. She had the tone of a university lecturer presenting a proof. This follows this supports this leads here. At some point during the 20 minutes, the caretaker woman, who had been standing in the kitchen pretending to clean something, moved closer to the doorway because she didn't want to miss any of it. When Mrs. Adebisi finished, she folded her hands in her lap and waited. Benson was quiet for almost a full minute. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its professional projection. He sounded, for the first time in years, like an ordinary man. "Madam, I want to beg. I am not interested in begging." "Then what do you want, ma?" "Restitution, to all 5, and an undertaking, written, signed, witnessed by my daughter and the lawyer downstairs, that you will not collect inspection fees without showing verified, habitable properties. You will also register properly with the Lagos State Real Estate Regulatory Body, which you are currently not registered with." "You checked?" "I checked in April, before today." She smiled slightly. "You have been operating without a license for 6 years, Benson. That alone is enough to end this conversation in a courtroom." Benson stared at the floor. The floor offered him no advice. If you do these things, I will not file a report. The 5 people may or may not pursue their individual complaints. That is their choice, not mine. But I will not add my own, and I will not contact LASA or the newspapers. She paused. "My daughter's phone is still running." Another pause. "It has been running since we left your mango tree this morning." Benson looked out the window. Titi waved. Benson turned back to Mrs. Adebisi. He looked at her for a long time, really looked at her. And in that moment, he understood something that many people in Lagos spent their whole lives not understanding. That the city rewards the bold, yes, but it also eventually, inevitably, introduces you to someone who is bolder and has better documentation. "Okay," he said, "I agree." Diola, the lawyer, came upstairs and drafted the undertaking on her laptop right there in the flat on Afolabi Street because she had brought her laptop in her bag because she was prepared for exactly this, and also because she had been hoping this would happen since she'd seen the WhatsApp thread and wanted to be part of the story. The undertaking was 4 paragraphs. Benson signed it. Titi witnessed it. The caretaker woman was asked to be the second witness, and she agreed with speed. Benson called his bank. He transferred refunds. Priscilla got her 5,000 naira back. Mama Chisom got her 5,000 naira back. Mr. Haruna got his 10,000 naira back. The Edo couple got 5,000 naira back. The engineer Obiechina's account received 20,000 naira from Benson Okoli with a transfer note that said only, "Sorry for your trouble." The engineer's mother, upon hearing this, laughed for 10 minutes and said God had used a small woman to do a big thing. Benson did not go to his mango tree the next day or the day after. His cousin Emeka, who sold pure water, called him to say that people were stopping at the mango tree to take photos with it as a joke, and someone had added their own sign below Benson's sign. Benson Okoli, currently under renovation, like all his houses. Benson stayed home for 1 week. He watched television. He thought about things. Now, this is Lagos. And Lagos is not a place where people change completely, because complete change requires a quietness that Lagos does not provide. What Lagos allows is partial change, the kind that happens when the alternative to changing is worse than the discomfort of the change itself. Benson went to the Real Estate Regulatory Body and paid his registration fee. The officer who processed his registration recognized his name from the article and said nothing, but smiled with her whole face in a way that said everything. He called an agent he knew, a legitimate one, a woman named Mrs. Fashola, who had been doing proper property deals in Surulere for 15 years and had a real office with a real signboard and real receipt books. And he sat with her for 2 hours and asked questions about how to actually find and verify properties before bringing clients to them. Mrs. Fashola was so surprised by this conversation that she forgot to charge him for her time. He went back to his mango tree, he sat down, he bought a new notebook. He wrote, "To do. Verify properties, check water, check roof, check neighbors. Do not show cemetery to anybody ever again." His first new client after the Reformation came on a Thursday, a young man from Ogun State, fresh face, looking for his single room self-contained. Benson took him to 3 places, all verified in advance. The young man liked the second one. Benson collected his fee. He wrote a receipt. He gave it. It was the strangest feeling. He sat back at his mango tree afterward and tried to identify it. It took him a few minutes. He called it peace. It was unfamiliar. It felt like freedom. Benson Okolu still operates from his mango tree on Ajayi Crescent. His sign is the same, except someone has laminated it and added, in smaller text below his name, the word registered. He gives receipts now. He shows real houses.